How many Americans do we need to kill before we respond? Not waiting for 100 of theirs for one of ours, maybe 1,000 of theirs, and immediately. 2 American soldiers and a translator were killed in Syria. This isn't abstract statistics. These are 3 specific people whom our country promised to protect. And part of that protection means that if something happens to them, then something bad or even much worse will happen in return. With everyone who is directly or indirectly involved in this crime, theft is not divided into big or small. No matter how much was stolen, the fact remains, a thief is a thief. There are no partial murders. If one of ours is killed, we are obliged to strike so hard that the next ones are too afraid to even think about repeating it. This is the only way to respond, in my opinion. There is no other way, I think. I can't imagine one. A proportional response is just as nonsense as, well, I don't know, turning the other cheek or loving your neighbor's children as your own. I don't know, it's impossible. That's a proportional response. That's a guarantee of the deaths of our boys and girls in the future. If you want to know how the Trump doctrine differs from what America has done in the past, promising that if this happens, then that will happen and so on, and did nothing or tried to respond in a politically correct, proportional way, as if saying our citizen is worth exactly as much as your terrorist and not a penny more. The Israelis, in negotiations with terrorists, have already determined the value of one of their citizens for Sergeant Giladi. 1,027 Arabs were released from prison, and from that moment, the exchange rate for an Israeli was set. For one killed Jew, Israel had the moral right to kill 1,027 Arab residents of neighboring countries, if, of course, they rejoiced that the Twin Towers in New York were destroyed and 3,000 people died. America, before Trump, had not yet calculated the value of an American. Honestly, I don't know whether to count American Jews at the same rate as Israelis, for example, or to come up with some new formula. Near Palmyra in Syria, American and Syrian forces patrolled together. Per the Pentagon's version, it was an ambush by an armed Islamic State of Iraq and Syria member who had long been suspected of extremist views, but nevertheless was not dismissed from the local police, and he had a weapon in his hands that had been officially issued to him by the Syrian authorities. It's almost impossible to tell by sight who is an ally and who is an enemy. The same units can cooperate with us in one area and fight against our partners in another area at the same time. The enemies are always the remnants of Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant pro-Iranian Shiite militias and Turkish infiltrated so-called partisans who fight against the Kurds, the allies of the United States. In Syria, there is no clear division between our good militants and the bad ones who aren't ours. Of course, I'm not suggesting to kill 3,000 for 3 dead, I mean 3,000 Syrians. Yes, of course, we're talking about destroying camps, warehouses, communications, and also commanders, not just the perpetrators. The whole world should know that if you touch our people, you automatically get a strike on your entire infrastructure and everyone who helps you. And never, if something happens, as soon as we find something out, as soon as we find out who it was, who was involved, and how to respond in the most painful way, we do it immediately. The answer is clear, understandable, and always pre-announced rules. In a couple of minutes, we will get to the most painful question. Where is the line between a justified fear of punishment and meaningless escalation? And the key to this question, as I already said, is clear and pre-announced rules. During the war in Gaza in 2023, Iranian proxies carried out more than 170 attacks on United States bases located in Syria, Iran, and Jordan. The Biden administration called on all of us to respond with restraint and tried to respond, well, only with targeted responses, as they said. The attacks continued and escalated, of course, until the number of incidents became a reason for a large-scale strike. In February 2024, during that same 2023 period, Hezbollah began using small drones against Israel. The United States demanded restraint from Israel. Hezbollah sensed, as we were told, a window of opportunity and moved on to using drones already carrying missiles. And now strikes are being carried out on serious targets inside Israel, including a strike on the large Tal Shemaim aerostat. From experience, we understand that the world only respects those who strike immediately and strike very hard. When we are attacked, the idea of not angering those who attack us too much only leads to more destruction and killings. We must immediately break the hand that tried to strike us. A response of 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1, and this is not escalation. This must and should become the rule of our behavior. Very soon we will come to a conclusion about what the new American doctrine of punishment should look like, because this is not just a doctrine of response. This is a doctrine of punishment. That is an absolutely unmeasured, unbalanced, and disproportionate, by no means a proportionate response. The only correct response to the enemy and the murderer. Why did Obama and Biden respond so slowly? For a left-wing politician, it's important not to look like an aggressor, so leftists are always afraid of being labeled. Incomprehensible revenge, a war crime. For example, right now, anti-Trump activists are blowing up the case about 2 shots fired at people, at drug dealers who were carrying drugs in a boat to America off the coast of Venezuela. All the cases happened supposedly after the first explosion. They stopped the boat, and the second attack was already considered a war crime. Delaying and demanding proportionality benefits those who are not afraid of the enemy, but of the cost. Escalation, meaning a collapse in ratings, their own international scandal, accusations by political opponents of racism, God forbid, of Islamophobia. He fired twice instead of once, even though he could have fired once, so he must be an Islamophobe. And so on. Nonsense. So bureaucrats and military men who are thinking about their careers can't be called the ones who provoked the war. It's easier to bomb warehouses selectively and say that it's an acceptable proportional response. Will it stop anyone tomorrow or the day after? No, of course not. Everyone knows that, yes, but everyone cares more about their own skin. The elite love wars, their failures and theft can be blamed on external reasons, but they like wars that are slow, ongoing, medium to large scale. The United Nations, which is a failed and useless organization, wrote in its rules that you shouldn't respond too strongly, but they never explained what that means. If you respond too strongly, that's a violation of humanitarian law and grounds for investigations, sanctions, and criminal cases. So the requirement of proportionality isn't about fairness to the victims and their families. The continuation isn't about stopping future terrorist attacks, but about minimizing risk for the leadership and maintaining a nice image of a proper war, or as it's now called, a managed conflict. A war doesn't end when we say the right and beautiful words about peace, but when the enemy develops a simple association in their mind that messing with us will cost them dearly. It's not a declaration or a resolution, but the fear of an immediate, predictable, and very painful response that stops the next bullet and the next explosion. Ladies and gentlemen, when a response always comes, and when it is absolutely disproportionate, the enemy starts to think of an attack as an act of suicide. And not just his own suicide, but also the suicide of everyone who is somehow involved in the crime against our soldiers, our citizens. There will be no small, precise strikes. The game for our enemies must stop being profitable. The stakes must become too high for them to want to get involved in this matter. In general, prolonged wars start with many small episodes, as well as with equivalent balanced responses. A catastrophic response does not provoke a war. Everyone knows that it is a response. Everyone must be warned in advance about what our red line is. It's not about 100 people killed or a plane explosion, but the death of any American at the hands of a deliberate murderer who wishes harm to America. To be continued. In this environment, wars become too expensive for the attackers and too costly for those who want to profit from this bloodshed.